The ownership levels in FPL is very important. Why is that? It's because if there's a player that's highly owned at your rank and they do well and you don't own them, that's going to massively hurt your rank. Now, the most important thing in FPL in my mind is to have fun. So if the fun thing to do is just pick the players you think look good, or you like their name, or you think they're good looking, that's fine. That is absolutely the way you should play. A lot of managers will use sites that predict the scores for the upcoming game week, which is an okay thing to do, but the predictions are actually quite a long way out because they don't know the future and there are so many variables, it's hard to know. So the predicted scores are actually an unknown, rather the scores they're going to get is an unknown. But what we do know is the ownership levels around your rank. And that is very important because if there's a highly owned player at your rank that you don't own and they do well, that is absolutely going to hurt your rank. So it's definitely worth considering who are the highly owned players, and then is there a good reason not to own them, or are you comfortable not owning them? And if you don't own them, you could be in trouble. For example, João Pedro last week, many managers sold him because he'd not done anything for a few game weeks. They just dumped him, even though he had some nice fixtures coming up. I understand that, and I was tempted to move him on, but I didn't in the end because his ownership level was too high, and I knew I'd be in for trouble if he did well. And then he scored, and now he's got a couple of nice games coming up, so I'm glad I kept hold of him. So this video is all about looking at the popular players around my rank, but it's probably not an awful lot different to whatever your rank is. And then what I think of them. Are they worth having? Can we avoid not having them? Is it risky not having them? Hopefully that made some sense. All right, let's have a look at the players. So let's start by looking at who are the popular players around my rank, which is currently about 450,000. The x-axis is the ownership levels, the y is the price. Top right we have Haaland. Effectively, everyone owns Haaland. If you don't own Haaland, he's going to really hurt your rank every time he does well. And of course, most managers captain him, so he's going to be doubly hurting your rank. And then second most owned is Semenyo at 83.5%. So I have to own him and I have to play him. He's blanked for a couple of game weeks now, but the upcoming fixtures are a little bit nicer, so he's got to be playing. And there's the defender Gabriel. He's up to a massive 76.2. Now, if you go to the official website and look at his ownership level, it's much lower than that. But you shouldn't care about what's the player base as a whole doing. It should be what the teams around my rank, how are they doing? And there are websites that can help you. For example, Live FPL is a good website, or FPL Gameweek. They will both show you ownership levels around your rank and which players are a threat to you. The fourth most owned player for me is Raya. Now, I don't own Raya, and a player at 46.6% who's good, and Raya is good, I should really have. However, he seems to be topping out at 6 points. And I have Pope, who's the second most highly owned keeper, and he's all the way down here at 14%. Now, I suspect Arsenal are going to have a couple of non-clean sheets in the next few game weeks. So I'm not overly worried about it. If I was wildcarding now, I think I would get Raya. But I don't have transfers to burn, so I'm not bringing him in at the moment. But maybe in a few game weeks, if he stays high, I'll have to. So he's potentially going to hurt my rank a bit if Pope does bad, but he's not a massive problem to me. Then we've got these three defenders who are cheaper than these two forwards. The two forwards that are popular between 40 and 50. We've got Mateta at 43.5%, João Pedro at 44.4%, and defenders Gehi at 44.9%, Van de Ven 43.8%, and Senesi 41.1%. So ideally, I should have those players and I should be playing those players to protect my rank. Then it doesn't matter if they do well or not. The point is, if they do well and I don't own them, then I'm in trouble. And if I take a random player down here, let's have a look. If King, a lot of people do own him. A lot of people aren't going to play him. He's just bench fodder. But if he does well, he gets 20 points. I'm guessing he's going to be played by 3% of teams. That is not going to hurt my rank. I don't care about him. What if Welbeck does well? He's lowly owned. I don't care. He's not going to hurt me. So he's at 9.7%. And let's take Voltemada. He's at 30%. So if I don't own either of those, Voltemada getting 5 points is going to hurt me more than Welbeck getting 15 points. So it's a game about fear for me this season. Let's just try and go for the popular players. So I'm going to start by looking at the goalkeepers, look at each position in turn. And Raya is currently the highest owned goalkeeper, and he's been brought in by about 92,000 managers net. So the top right of each card that I show you, there's a little number, and that's the net transfer. So transfers in take away the transfers out. So he's still being brought in. He's up at a massive 5.8 million. And because he maxes out at 6 points, I'm not too bothered about playing him at all. Now, there's an excellent video or podcast, depends what you like, by Above Average FPL on Sunday, and Harry was on there, and they were arguing about whether Ray is a good pick or not. And it was quite amusing, worth a listen to. I like to listen to every week, actually. They're very good. Personally, I don't care too much about Raya. If you've got any playing keeper, that's all right. They are going to go through a barren patch at some point, but defensively they are very good. Wildcarding, absolutely worth getting. Not wildcarding. If you've got 4 or 5 free transfers, you could bring him in. Or if you've got an awful keeper, you could bring him in. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. Now, you'll also see on each card an XP. That's the expected points for this coming game week, and that is based on numbers from Solo Analytics. There should be a link in the video. I'm not affiliated with them. That is, I get no kickback if you use them. But it's a very fun site to use. You can see how changing your teams can affect things. They have predicted points, etc. And then the other number is the damage. So if you don't have Raya, based on his predicted score and his ownership levels at my rank, he's going to get minus 2.1 points for me. He's probably going to get 6 points though. So he's probably going to be like minus 2.8 or something. So that's Raya, very good keeper. If you've got him, that's great. If you've not got him, unless you're wildcarding or got loads of free transfers, probably wouldn't bring him in. So Pope's falling slightly, down 13,000, but he's perfectly good. He's fine to have. I know Newcastle haven't kept clean sheets the last few game weeks, and against West Ham they let in 3 goals, which was a surprise, but they didn't look great. So maybe they were just tired, maybe they had a virus or something. Whatever the reason, but historically, going back years as I remember, Newcastle often struggle in London. So I'm not overly worried. This coming game week, they're in London again, away to Brentford, then they're home to Man City. So that may be part of the reason why people are selling Pope. But Pope's the only Newcastle player at the moment I'd be happy owning, but he's all right. I'm not going to change him just yet. Sanchez, he's growing in popularity, up 12,000, 4.8 million, so 0.4 cheaper than Pope. He's expected to do better than Pope this game week. He's got Wolves, then Burnley, then it's Arsenal, then Leeds. Perfectly fine keeper to have. If I had him, I wouldn't change him. If he's the keeper you want on a wild card, that's all right. He's cheaper than Raya. Donnarumma's dropping slightly, 23,000 down. He's 0.1 cheaper than Raya now. But I suspect people are moving from Donnarumma to Raya. There's nothing wrong with Donnarumma. If you've got him, he's fine to have. Yes, he's got Liverpool this game week. I wouldn't worry about that. Then Vicario, he's dropping. He's down another 20,000. None of these keepers are going to hurt your rank if you don't own them, except for Raya. So basically, if you've got a playing keeper, that's fine. Just play your playing keeper. And next time you've got a surplus of transfers to use or you're wildcarding, then think about which keeper you're going to get. And I like to show at least 10 for each position. Pickford's very unpopular now. He's down another 10,000. Home to Fulham. Personally, I like Pickford. I quite like owning him, but he's not been great recently. Petrovic's only 4.5 million, so he's arguably the best, certainly the most popular 4.5 million keeper to have. Kelleher's 4.5 million. Petrovic's up by 6,000. Kelleher's down by 8,000. Much of a muchness. Dubravka's a banker. That is to say, you really should own him. Don't use a transfer to get him in, unless it's to free up funds. But given that he plays every game week, he's only 4 million. You get him, and most weeks he sits on your bench. And then we have Roofs, the Sunderland defender. Sunderland defensively have been very good this season, and he's only 4.7 million. So defenders, Gabriel has been brought in by over 250,000 managers so far. The third most important player at my rank behind Semenyo and Haaland. The best defender in the game at the moment. Definitely worth bringing in. If your team's awful, he's worth a hit. If your defence or team isn't awful, I wouldn't take a hit to bring him in. But he's definitely worth bringing in if you've not got him. Even if he does poorly for a while, it's to protect your rank. And then Senesi's the next most important. He's been offloaded by a net of 19,000 managers. Away to Villa. Now, I should play Senesi this game week, but there's 3 players I'm trying to decide between it. I may have to bench him, which I'm not very happy about, but that's just because I got other players I really want to play, or rather I should be playing. But his run of fixtures is good. Villa, West Ham, Sunderland, Everton. Very, very solid defender to have, worth having. Now, Gay, if you watch other FPL creators, content creators, they tend to rave on more about the other Palace defenders, like Munoz if you can get to him, otherwise maybe Lacroix or Richards because he's nice and cheap. The reality is, Gay's the one that's getting the points at the moment, and he is the most popular. So if you want to get a Palace defender or you just need a defender, he is actually the right one to be getting. And he's 119,000 net in, so he may be going up in price in a bit. But even if he's not, his popularity is growing. Timber's popularity, he's up by 44,000, but he's not getting as many points as Gabriel. He's not going to hurt you anywhere near as much as Gabriel's going to hurt you, unless he does ridiculously well. But he probably won't. Gabriel's still the safer one to get. A lot of teams have got 3 Arsenal, obviously, and at least 2 at the back. So Gabriel and Timber's a popular choice. Otherwise, Gabriel and Ray is popular. So Van de Ven, he scored a ridiculous goal last night in the Champions League. It was brilliant. Took it from right outside his own goal area and just drove it all the way to the other end and scored. So that's probably going to help his popularity a bit. Plus, he got 23 points in game week 9. He's at home to Man United, and I suspect quite a lot of managers are going to play him. And he's one of the ones that I'm choosing between Van de Ven, Senesi, and then Caicedo. Which one am I going to play? Which 2 do I play this game week? So Van de Ven, he's clearly a good player. He's expected to only get 2.7 points this week, whereas Senesi's 3.9. He's not going to hurt you as much as Senesi's going to hurt you. But I do like him. If I was wildcarding, wouldn't necessarily get him. Man United, Arsenal, Fulham, and Newcastle, not great fixtures. I probably wouldn't be using a transfer to bring him in. Wildcard, probably wouldn't get him either, but he's a perfectly good choice to have. So Munoz, very popular. I'd very much like to have Munoz because I think he's got the capacity to get some good scores. He's a very attacking midfielder. He's up by 33,000 at the moment. Perfectly good to have. If you don't have him, he's not going to hurt you. None of these defenders left now are going to hurt you if you don't own them. Cucurella, he's up by just 9,000. Quite expensive at 6.1 million, but he is attacking. Next 2 are great, Wolves and Burnley. Chance of a clean sheet, reasonable chance of an attacking return there. Virgil van Dijk, he's down by 64,000. Away to Man City, so good chance of not getting a clean sheet this game week. But from game week 12, and we're in game week 11 just now, from game week 12, Liverpool have very nice fixtures. So it's feasible, maybe even likely, that from next game week, managers are going to start bringing him in. But you can only have 3 Liverpool players, and at 6 million, maybe you'll think he's going to be too expensive. Calafiori, so that's the 3rd Arsenal defender on this page now. He's up by just 3,000. He's all right, but Timber's higher owned. So even though some people are thinking Calafiori's going to maybe get more points, Timber's safer because of the ownership level. But Gabriel, you kind of have to have. Second page of defenders, none of these are going to hurt you. Pedro Porro, quite like him, but he's down by 63,000. He's not going to hurt your rank. I wouldn't be surprised if some people are moving from Pedro Porro to Van de Ven. Probably not a great move. Pedro Porro to somebody else on the previous page, that makes sense. Then Dan Burn. So Newcastle haven't had a clean sheet, I think, for the last 3 games. And their fixtures coming up aren't great. It makes sense why he's getting dumped. Absolutely don't need to dump him, but if you've got nothing else to do, it's fine to switch him for one of the other defenders. And then bench fodder, Mukulele, he plays and sometimes you get you a clean sheet, maybe an attacking return. Rodon, bench fodder. Goodmanson, bench fodder. You need to have some cheap players in your team. The way I like to play is to have a cheap keeper and then 3 other cheap outfield players that are just on my bench. So I've got a core of 11 players that I use every game week. Then on to midfielders. Semenyo, massively owned. He's up by another 21,000. Expected to get 4.2 points this game week. If you don't own him or you don't play him and he does well, he's going to hurt your rank a fair bit. Mbeumo, he's now the 2nd most important midfielder. Quite high ownership and up by another 121,000 this game week. 8.4 million. Now, he is, of course, off to African Cup of Nations in a few game weeks, but he's still worth bringing him in if you want to bring him in. I wouldn't worry about AFCON now. Maybe by the time we're about game week 13, 14, you'd be a bit more reserved about using a transfer, but at the moment, he's fine. He's a good player. So Saka, he's expected to do well. He is a good player, albeit he's not been doing much the last few game weeks, but he's got Sunderland, then he's at home for the North London derby, then Chelsea, then Brentford. So he's got a nice run of fixtures. Personally, I wouldn't be bringing him in. I wouldn't bring him in on a wild card, but I do have him, but I'm not going to be selling in this game week. So for those three on the screen at the moment, Semenyo's expected to get 4.2, Mbeumo 4.5, Saka 6.4. But from a damage point of view, if you don't own them, Semenyo's minus 3.5, Mbeumo minus 1.6, Saka minus 1.5. So if you didn't own any of them, even though Saka might score 50% more than Semenyo, Semenyo's the one that's going to hurt you. And Saka's been offloaded by 46,000. Kudus is the next most popular, but he's been offloaded by a massive 218,000. He's a very good player. The fixtures aren't great for Spurs, and there are other midfielders to get. So I think probably managers are offloading him mostly because there are potentially better midfielders to have at the moment, as opposed to, I don't like Kudus anymore. If you've got Kudus, you want to keep him, I'd be fine with that. But of course, his value is going down. Then Caicedo, he's been brought in by over 250,000 so far. He's now up to 6 million. I think he started on 5.5. He does keep scoring points. Now, other content creators will go on about, oh, look at his XG. His XG is really bad. This isn't sustainable. He's not going to keep getting points. I think XG personally is a stupid measure. Apart from a forward whose job it is to be in the goal area and take a shot, then you care about his XG. But someone like Caicedo, who takes shots from a long way away, they're always going to be low XG shots. And some of them are going in. So forwards, okay, think about XG. If they're not forwards, don't worry about it. That's my feeling. Anyway, 6 million, he's popular. He's not going to be hurting your rank yet, but if he keeps growing in popularity, like if he makes the top 3, then you're going to have to decide if you're going to take him or not. Rice. So it looks like a few weeks ago, a lot of managers brought in Saka. I brought in Saka. I could afford to. But some managers couldn't afford Saka, so they brought Rice as cover, thinking he wouldn't do quite as well. Rice has easily outperformed Saka. Rice is very good. Been brought in by nearly a net of 300,000 managers so far this game week. He's doing very well. He's not expected to do as well as Saka going forward. And at the moment, his ownership levels are such that he's not going to hurt you too bad if he does well. But he is certainly a good player to have. Fernandes is good. He's down just slightly, so pretty flat, down by 4,000 net transfers. 500,000 more than Mbeumo, but he is expected to score considerably better than Mbeumo. We assume he's still on penalties. I've seen some teams with Fernandes and Mbeumo, and that's fine. The thing with Fernandes is he's likely to get a lot of games between about 4 and 5, maybe 10 points. So Mbeumo's maybe got more chance of getting a high score, but Mbeumo's possibly got more chance of just getting 2 points as well. Then Ndaya, he's a good player playing for a bad team. He had a good goal last game week actually. But I'm saying don't buy him because he's flagged. But if I had Ndaya, I'd be perfectly happy having him. We wouldn't be bringing him in, of course, but he's fine to have, and hopefully it's a very minor injury. We don't know if he's going to play. Current expectation last I saw is probably going to play, but we don't know. Sarr is a good player, brought in by 42,000. He's a very good player, plays up front for Palace alongside Mateta, but his ownership levels at my level, at my rank, is still very low, so I don't need to worry about him. But it's feasible the next couple of game weeks he's going to be rising up, and then I may be forced to get him. And then Reinders, he's been dumped by over 200,000 so far this game week. Now, we didn't know that he hadn't trained all week. If we did, I'd have certainly had him on my bench, but I played him, he came on, I think he got a point, which is a bit annoying because I would have played Xhaka and I think he got 10. So, fine to offload him, but he is a good player, and it's clear that Pep does really like him. So my expectation is he's still going to get lots of game minutes, and he's probably still going to get some game weeks with some good points. But from an ownership level, there's no fear. There should be no fear now about him. He's fine to offload. he's also fine to keep. Personally, I wouldn't be buying him. Second page of midfielders, so Enzo, he's down slightly by 19,000, but he's expected to be very good for the next couple of game weeks. He's got Wolves at home, then he's away to Burnley. Then 2 games after that, he's away to Leeds. So a lot of content creators, generally they'll all say get Enzo rather than Caicedo. Of course, Caicedo is 0.7 cheaper. Reality is Caicedo has been scoring more points. Enzo is not going to hurt your rank. Caicedo's not quite going to hurt your rank at the moment, but if he keeps growing in popularity, he certainly could do. But Enzo's a perfectly good player to get if you want a midfielder around that price. If I had him, I'd be very happy to have him, except he's lowly owned. Eze's dropped by net 37,000 so far. He's expected to do well in the upcoming game weeks, but he doesn't get 90 minutes, and there's easily 3 other Arsenal players that I'd rather be having. Grealish is down by 50,000 net so far. Perfectly okay player, but for 6.9 million, there are cheaper mids. Just look at the previous page. That would be more sense to have. Gakpo, he's down by 48,000 so far. 7.6 million away to Man City. Not expected to do well, but if we knew he was always going to get 80 or more points from next game week, he'd be massively popular. Decent run of fixtures coming up. Another reason to dump him is, of course, there's easily 5 other midfielders at the moment that are better, and he's moderately expensive at 7.6 million. If you've got him, you want to keep him, that's fine. There isn't a world where I'd be bringing him in. Well, there is. I guess if I was wildcarding, I may consider bringing him in, because I'd want him potentially from next game week, but I wouldn't use a transfer to bring him in. Then King is simply bench fodder. Occasionally you might have to come in for you, but 4.5 million, that's just someone cheap to sit on your bench. Everyone owns Haaland, and yet 69,000 managers so far this game week have realised, oops, I don't own him yet, and they've brought him in. So unless you're having fun, like FPL General, by not owning Haaland out of principle, do an experiment, see how bad you can do, you kind of got to have him. It doesn't matter how good or bad Haaland does, it's not going to affect your rank. It just comes down to, if you captain him, you kind of don't really care how he does. It's nice if he does well, but it doesn't matter. But the reality is he is doing very well at the moment. Up to 14.8 million now. Every point he gets is going to be 2 points against you pretty much because of captaincy. Then João Pedro, he was dumped by loads of managers last game week, and then he scored. And he got good XG. I know I'm saying you don't care about XG unless they're a forward. He's a forward. XG matters. He did well. Wolves and Burnley next 2 game weeks. Managers are now reversing their decision to sell him, and they're bringing him in. So, okay, fair enough. Well done if you held on to him. If I wasn't wildcarding and I didn't have him, I don't think I'd be bringing him in, because there are other choices, other players that I'd be getting him. But if you've got him, well done for keeping hold of him. Mateta, very popular, brought in by over 300,000 net so far this game week. Expected to do well. Nice run of fixtures. If he stays fit, should be getting some decent points. Voltemade, so far been dumped by a net of 113,000. He's not scored more than 1 goal a game. I don't think he's scored the last couple of games. Newcastle's upcoming fixtures aren't great. The other 3 forwards on the page at the moment are a better choice than him. They're expected to score more points. They're going to do you more damage. If you've got him, he's fine to have. I wouldn't be desperate to sell him, but if you wanted to, that's fine. There's no world at the moment I'd be bringing him in. Welbeck, he's up. He's been brought in by 93,000 managers so far, but he's not going to be hurting your rank, as I showed you earlier on the chart page. The reason to not buy him is he's old. What is minutes going to do? However, he just keeps playing and he just keeps scoring. So he's fine to have. He would be quite a big differential at the moment, because if you've got him, it means you've not got one of Haaland, João Pedro or Mateta. Thiago's up 18,000. Yes, he keeps getting points, which is good, and it's Brentford. But one of the reasons he's quite popular is he's only 6.2 million, but he's a perfectly good player to have. Ekitike, he seems to be better than Isak, but the trouble is they paid a lot more money for Isak. So when Isak's fit and he's currently flagged, who's going to get the game time? Maybe it was a mistake for Liverpool to get Isak with C in the coming game weeks. If there was no Isak, then Ekitike would be a good player to have, and from next game week, very good. Creepy Jr., he's been brought in by 40,000, but he's effectively bench fodder. Yes, he has scored some goals in the recent past, but you still need to kind of think if you're buying him, it's because he's quite cheap. And then Mark Gay, he's just bench fodder, 4.2 million. Goalkeepers, so he's been sold by 156,000 so far. He's last on this page because he's injured. We don't know if he's going to be playing this game week. It looks like probably not. We don't know when he's going to be back. So if you've got Goalkeepers and you can afford the transfer, moving him to, for example, Mateta or João Pedro is a nice, easy move. Absolutely worth doing. Now we're going to look at a benching order. This is my suggested benching order based on points and ownership levels and what I currently think for the current game week. So for the goalkeepers, if you've got Rare, of course you're playing him. And then it's going to be Pope, Sanchez, Donnarumma, Vicario, Pickford, Petrovic, Kelleher, Dubravka and Roofs. So if you have Dubravka and Roofs is playing Arsenal, Dubravka West Ham, I actually think it's probably worth playing Dubravka. And then for the other players, I know this is going to be slightly controversial. It's going to go against what other content creators are saying, but this is just what makes sense to me. There are 6 I'm not showing you because they're captaincy choices. So if you've got Semenyo, you've got to play him. Same with Mbeumo, Fernandes, Sarr, Timber, Senesi, Gehi, Munoz, Cucurella, Fortamade, Rice, Calafore, Welbeck, Kudos, Eze, Calcedo, Van de Ven, and Dyer. So if we look at Van de Ven and Dyer, for example, Van de Ven's expected to get 2.7 points and Dyer's expected to get 4.6. Let's assume he plays. However, if you don't own either of them, I realise they're a different position. Van de Ven is going to cause you more harm than Dyer would. So which one do you bench? Also, Van de Ven has scored 3 goals in his last 3 games. Spurs have been awful at home so far this season and since they've moved to the stadium, but they did do well last night. They're at home to Man United. Man United can blow a bit hot and cold. I wouldn't expect Van de Ven to get a clean sheet at all. I think there's a chance he'll get a goal though. Then Ekiteke, Gakpo. None of these are going to hurt your rank, by the way, if you don't own them. Thiago, Gyökeres, in case he plays, but I'm not expecting him to. Reinders, Grealish, Virgil van Dijk, Pedro Porro, Byrne. Then Electric Steve, Rodon, Goodmanson, Mukulele, King, Creeper Jr., Mark Gehi. And you may have noticed there's no Salah this game week. That's because I'm looking at players that have either been brought in by at least 100,000 managers or sold by 100,000 or at least 10% owned. Salah's not even 10% owned at my rank anymore. So he's not going to hurt me. Don't care about him. Maybe next game week he'll be back in because managers bring him in. We'll have to find out. Regarding captaincy, even though Haaland's playing Liverpool, he's by far the safest choice to wear the old mule hat this game week. Certainly who I'm intending to captain. If you want to go elsewhere, last game week we said about Gabriel, he ended up getting 12 points, Haaland 13. Again, he's playing Sunderland. He's an alright choice. You could go with him. João Pedro at home to Wolves. If he plays as well and Chelsea did play as well as he did last game week, he could be getting some nice points. But the several game weeks before that, he did nothing. So a bit risky, but he could get something nice. Mateta could be good. Saka, yes, he's been disappointing recently. He might get something. You could even go for Enzo if you want to go for a bit of an outside, very risky choice. But by far, Haaland has to be the safest choice. He's the one that's probably worth getting. And then I've got a new page, which is looking at the size of the transfers being made. Green is net transfers in, red is net transfers out. I realise you might not be able to read this if you're watching it on your phone, but this shows that Mateta is the most brought in player at the moment, 311,000 net transfers. So he's a forward. So which forwards are being sold? I can see Gyökeres is being sold, 156,000 so far. Baltamade is being sold, 113,000. And it's just nice to see where it's going. So I don't blindly say get the most popular players. I'm also thinking I don't want to get this popular player who's getting dumped if there's one slightly less popular but being brought in, because they're going to be swapping places. But anyway, just another chat. And that's my thought for the players for Game Week 11. And after this weekend, we've got an international break. So that means you won't have to listen to me. You won't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to me anyway. You've got better things to do. Hope you have a fun game week. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.